Our schools have become an indoctrination ground for the left, and we're seeing it more and more. Educators are speaking up about their concerns about parents actually being able to find out what they are teaching their kids. And this concern comes as a lot of these courses go online, and you're finding that teachers are worried that parents are going to overhear the lessons because the kids are now at home. And they're going to find out how they are indoctrinating the students. And for some reason, it's a growing epidemic that these educators think that it is their job to instill left wing values, almost, and oftentimes Marxist and communist values, into these students. And it's just really reminiscent of the Vladimir Lenin quote, "Give me the child for 8 years and he'll be a Bolshevik for life." And I think that's what we're seeing now a lot with students that are going to college. They're being radicalized into left-wing ideology, and they're coming out these social justice warriors. They hate their parents. They hate their uncle. They call everything the racist uncle and that kind of thing. And a lot of this is just coming down to the fact that parents weren't taking as active of a role in their child's education to find out what was actually being taught. And we have this Mel magazine. They had this article in here. And I've never heard of Mel magazine before, but it's called "The Kids Are Alt-Right When Your Star Pupil Gets Red-Pilled." First of all, what is it, 2017? Alt-right is not even a thing anymore. I haven't even heard of the alt-right in ages, because what they ended up doing was they started calling anybody right of Leon Trotsky alt-right, despite the fact that alt-right was a very specific ideology that was tied to white nationalism and ethnocentrism, where most of the people who are conservatives and on center right, we don't revere ethnocentrism in any way, shape, or form. In fact, we denounce it because we appreciate the founding principles that all men are created equal under God. So the whole alt-right thing kind of fizzled out because I think it was one of those things that they ran it into the ground and people were able to see through it at some point, and they said, all right, we got to pull the plug on this. It's not working anymore. And another thing is that we know this is going to be pure gaslighting because the kids are alt-right when your pupil gets red-pilled. Red-pilled and conservative, I guess you can kind of say, like, if somebody goes from the left to the right, or at least center left to center right, there's a degree of red pilling going on there, but full red pilling is not just becoming center right. It's not becoming a regular conservative. That's not really a full red pilling. Red pilling typically has to do. It's a little bit more conspiratorial, although not. It's not. I mean, it can range. Some conspiracy theories are way out there. Some actually are fairly decently evidenced, and they're less theoretical than they are just conspiratorial. Because conspiracies do exist. We have to acknowledge that. I mean, just look at Obamagate. Of course, the left calls that a conspiracy theory. But anyways, before I ramble on too long, let's go ahead and get into this article from Mel Magazine. The kids are alt-right when your star pupil gets red-pilled. Teachers know the warning signs when students are radicalized by online hate movements. All right, there is going to be a lot to break down in this. I can almost guarantee it. Because first of all, the left never knows how to look into the mirror and see exactly what they're doing. Because if you look at most of our educational systems, they are radicalizing students to the left. They are radicalizing them into this cult of intersectionality, this religion of intersectionality. This anti-racism movement that is so steeped in racism, that is so steeped in a racially tinged worldview that you cannot possibly escape racism by viewing the world through that lens. And of course, they're going to call everything a hate movement. Now, let's go a little bit further and see what exactly they define as hate movements, because the term hate is being thrown around so willy-nilly these days. Just a disagreement on a policy position or on a root cause of certain issues within a certain community. Maybe there's the standard narrative that this is racism is the reason why there's inequity in the black community, and I even hate the term equity because it refers to a equality of outcome and not an equality of opportunity. But there could be a whole lot more to look into than just, is it racism? So, but they call everything hate. So if you bring up something else that might be looked into, they'll say that, oh, you hate black people. It's like, no, I'm actually trying to solve the problem here, but I have to dig a little bit deeper than your very skin deep understanding of everything's racism. So, anyways, I know I'm rambling. So, Olivia, a 34-year-old teacher in Kentucky, had the great displeasure of watching one of her 14-year-old students become radicalized online. I don't know if you guys remember this article. I think it was the New York Times put out where they were talking about the radicalization of this guy who he was a left-wing guy, and then he got into a bunch of right-wing YouTube, and it was boilerplate stuff. I mean, it was like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson and stuff like that. By no stretch of the imagination are they far right or are they hate mongers. And then at the end of the article, he had gone back to being a left winger, completely dispelling the entire narrative that he got radicalized. He just explored other ideas for a while and then went back to what he thought before. So it's absolute gaslighting. So he went from being a sweet kid to a year later tweeting that if homosexuals weren't willing to change their ways, they should be killed. Okay, that is a bit hateful. But then again, if you point out that a large portion of the Islamic world thinks that, you're going to be viewed as hateful, you're going to be viewed as Islamophobic. Do you see what I'm saying here? Do you see how this is just an endless cycle of you can't get to the root of anything, or there's a double standard for one group that doesn't apply to another group? It's insane. It's absolutely insane. Also, I would like to point out, what is this 34-year-old teacher doing following her 14-year-old student on Instagram or on Twitter? You should not be following them. I work at a college and I don't follow any students on any social media because I don't think it's appropriate. All right, so let's see. Then he started tweeting about Black Lives Matter, immigrants, liberals, feminism, and anything else he could get his hands on. Okay, well, you're going to have to be more specific about what he tweeted about Black Lives Matter, immigrants, liberals, and feminism, because there are political issues and political truths that need to be talked about with all of those issues. So what they're doing here is they're trying to set you up so that you think that if he said that about homosexuals, then he's going to be saying things that are just as bad, if not worse, about all of these other issues. But we're not going to assume that premise that they want us to assume. So this is a kid that was generally kind and quiet, but he began following far-right figures on Twitter, and the rest is history. Jennifer, a 30-year-old teacher in Arizona, had a similar experience. She had one student in the 3rd grade who was a flat earther. What 3rd graders are flat earthers? And he raised his hand. And first of all, being a flat earther has nothing to do with being right wing. This is not a right wing position that the earth is flat. So let's go ahead and just cut that off at the cord right there. Because flat earthers are not part of our movement. Just not. So let's see. Flat earther, and he'd raise his hand. Or he'd raise this and other conspiracy theories about vaccines and the Illuminati at school. First of all, the whole vaccine conspiracy theory did not start on the right. In fact, I think a lot of the vaccine conspiracy theories started with a lot of the holistic crowd, which is kind of the hippy dippy crystal cloud. The Mary Williamson, whatever that presidential candidate was, who was actually very entertaining. A lot of it started with that crowd. The homeopathic crowd, they wanted, they started becoming very, theoretical about vaccines and things like that. I think even Jenny McCarthy wrote a book on an anti-vax book back like 10 years ago or something. And the Illuminati. So, whatever about the Illuminati. That's not really either a right-wing or left-wing thing either. He'd tell my class the earth is flat during our gravity lessons, and it was so difficult to explain to him that it can't be true. She says, he'd repeatedly tell me that I'm wrong and try to derail the class. He questioned me a lot in front of the kids as if he was testing my authority as a teacher. Honestly, I think a lot of teachers' authority should be tested. If you have just a teacher whose authority is never tested, they can indoctrinate your students with any ideas with no pushback. And I think pushback, especially in an educational setting, is healthy for the growing mind to become a critical thinker and be able to choose between which side made the better argument, which side made the more convincing argument. If she cannot out debate a third grader on flat Earth theory, then what is she doing as an educator? You know, if she's got an 8-year-old boy who's coming in there espousing flat Earth theory and she can't dispel that, she can't out debate a third grader on such a ludicrous thing as the Earth is flat, that says something scary about her ability as a teacher. He continued his mission outside of the classroom too, sharing conspiracy videos from YouTube with other students during recess. The prospect of red pilling, in which a person becomes radicalized by far-right spaces online. No. First of all, just because you have now seen some light and ideas that you had not heard before that are on the right, and the reason they haven't heard right-wing ideas before is because our culture, our institutions have been so infiltrated by left-wing ideology that these kids, they don't hear anything else. And so they just accept it as fact. And then they get exposed to more conservative ideas, and they're like, whoa, hold on, I'm starting to see the cracks, and I'm starting to see the cracks in the logic of everything that I've been taught at school. That's not an unhealthy thing. The prospect of red pilling, in which a person becomes radicalized by the far right spaces online, and even still, it's not radicalization, first of all, and it's also not far right. Now, there are some things that are far right, and there are some things that are conspiracy theory that have nothing to do with the left and right political spectrum. In fact, most conspiracy theories don't. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're left or right. If you think aliens and lizard people have been taking over the planet for the past 6,000 years, that has nothing to do with what side of the political spectrum you're on. That just means you believe some crazy stuff. All right. So, online has attracted a lot of media attention in the Trump era amid rising concerns about the political polarization and the ascent of far-right figures on platforms like YouTube. First of all, the reason a lot of it is a lot of right-wing people, I don't even like the term right-wing, let's just say conservative, right-of-center people, have been gaining traction online is because, A, they finally have a platform where those messages can actually be heard. Those people have always existed. And it's always been about half of the country that have been conservative and right of center, that we were just silenced. So now we actually have a platform to speak our minds, and these people are going crazy thinking it's some crazy radicalization red pill process. No, it's just actual exposure to different ideas, which should be welcomed in the educational discourse. So often the entry point for awkward or disgruntled men is the manosphere, a misogynistic online subculture that includes incels, men's rights activists, pickup artists, and men going their own way. This is not that large of a group of people. They're still on the fringes. This is not some big problem. And first of all, you don't have a subculture of incels. It means involuntarily celibate. It just means you can't get laid. Men's rights activists, I'm not a men's rights activist, but I also understand that men's rights activists do have some points, and they do have some valid points, because you can't necessarily have a women's rights activist where they get the same they get the same privilege of being a woman that they had before, but now they have also the same power, because you create double standards that should be pushed back against. So you can't have your cake and eat it too, is essentially what a lot of the men's rights activists push for. And like I said, I'm not a men's rights activist, but there are some certain things in that discussion that have merit. But this tends to be a gateway to other far-right talking points. No, it doesn't. I mean, maybe I've just never seen these men's rights spheres. I am like nothing but, I wouldn't say nothing but conservative stuff online. Actually, no, that's not true, because I listen to a lot of classical liberals too. People like Sargon of Akkad, people like Tim Pool, people who are not considered conservative, but they're classical liberals. But today, even classical liberals are considered far right because these people are so far left, they don't know what the center looks like anymore. Grievances related to a lack of sexual and romantic partners are located in the same places as right-wing propaganda. No, they are not. Around the refugee crisis and trans issues. No, Those are not in the same spaces. Like I said, I have been following a lot of conservative, center-right, some would even say right-wing people on YouTube, and I've never crossed over. I've never even found things about these incels. I've never even seen those videos. I've never even seen that culture. I've never been led down that path, despite the fact that I am deeply entrenched in conservative thought and conservative ideology. It's not even ideology. It's conservative principles. That's a better word. But the lack of sexual and romantic partners has nothing to do with right wing. That just has to do with awkward kids who remain awkward, and they have these... I don't even really know. I don't know that world, to be honest. Annie Kelly, a PhD student at the University of East Anglia, who researches the... Hold on, let's see. And trans issues. Annie Kelly, a PhD student at the University of East Anglia, who researches the impact of digital culture on the far right, told Mel in January 2019. She apparently is not worth her job, because she does not understand that these are not all intertwined. These are not all political, and they are not all right-wing. They don't all fall on the right-left spectrum. You can have people on both the left or the right that fall into the incel category. In fact, you could argue that a lot of these male feminists who tend to be predatory could be kind of in that incel movement, because they do that sleazy thing where they act like they're feminists, and they do that to try to sleep with women, and then these feminists, these are the only men that they have around them, and so all of a sudden they think all men are like that. But it's really just that the male feminists are the creepers. They don't have any real masculine men in their lives, and they don't even understand what masculinity is at that point. So this Annie Kelly lady, she clearly does not know what she's doing in her job. Either that, or she had a premise and she's looking to confirm it, which is the most likely scenario, is that she had a premise going in, she had a hypothesis, and she has done her research to confirm her hypothesis. When they're reinforced in these groups, as well as by mainstream media outlets on Facebook and YouTube, people end up buying into some of the maxims without realizing it. First of all, there are no mainstream media outlets, in fact, that push this stuff. In fact, Facebook and YouTube tends to suppress it. I had a feeling, I mean, you don't have to look, you don't have to dig very deep to find a whole host of people who get banned off of Facebook and YouTube for having conservative ideas or right-wing ideas, or even just, little off the mainstream path that get banished. So this is ridiculous. Generally, though, the focus tends to be on an adult individual who has been radicalized, or the impact of their partners. Again, they keep using this term radicalized when they don't understand how radicalized to the left they are. If you go to any kind of Trump rally or anything like that, if you're a leftist and you walk up to a Trumpster and you want to have a conversation and ask them what their beliefs are, they are more than open to talk to you. They want to engage with people and share ideas, and they want to hear from you too. But if you go to, say, an Antifa or one of these left-wing protests, they want to shut you down. They want to say that it's bad to even listen to alternative ideas. You want to tell me which one is radicalized? It's damn sure the left. There's been less attention paid to the unique position of teachers who find themselves braced with radicalizing students. Or find themselves faced with radicalizing students. You could read that a couple ways, because a lot of them think that their job is to radicalize the students. And they just don't, they're so radicalized they don't understand what it is. They don't even understand that they are radical and they are radicalizing students. And they're just getting pushback against it. And they think that pushback comes from a radicalized source, because they are so insular, so insulated in their bubble, that they don't even understand that a world exists that is mainstream outside of their worldview. So let's see. There's been less attention paid to the unique position of teachers. First of all, boo-hoo. Boo-hoo teachers. Who are just espousing left-wing ideology. Even though they are often the first witness of the early warning signs of red pilling among a younger cohort. We need more red pilling. In fact, we need to red pill the teachers. I have totally noticed the radicalizations of students with MRA stuff, says Kira Lynn Ferderber. Ferderber? That's like... There was a meme, like, back in like 2012 or something, where they put the in every vowel was replaced with the er, and that's what that sounds like. A sexual violence prevention educator in Florida. I teach kids of all ages, but I notice it most in middle school and high school boys, and it's getting worse and worse. That's because they're losing their grip on their ability to influence the youth. They're losing their ability to indoctrinate, and they hate it. Often it's hard for teachers to tell whether a student is truly being red-pilled in the sense that they're being radicalized online, or whether they're parroting views they've grown up with their conservative households. And this is where the mask slips, because they have actually used, because now they're showing that they're using the term far right and conservative interchangeably, when really conservatism is just about conserving the traditional American principles that actually should be the center of the fulcrum of American politics. That should just be the center. So they're actually revealing more than they realize, which shows how little they actually know about the topic that they are writing on themselves. Tessa, a 29-year-old in the Midwest who teaches 14 to 18-year-olds at a private school for students with learning impairment, says that while many of her students simply take on the talking points and politics of their conservative parents, this can make them especially ripe targets for full-blown radicalization and infatuation with far-right figures. A few started listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, which led them to reading Jordan Peterson books, she says. I think that Joe Rogan's ideology is the biggest threat to critical thinking in the last decade. Are you kidding me? Joe Rogan. I'm not even a fan of Joe Rogan because sometimes he's too far left for me. And I'm not a far right guy. But Joe Rogan has guests from all over the political spectrum. He talked about possibly voting for Bernie Sanders, an avowed socialist. These people have no idea what they're talking about. And then they're talking about reading Jordan Peterson, who basically tells you to clean your room, take responsibility for your life. These people, this is one of the cringiest articles I think I've ever read. I mean, it is. Oh, now, all right, so let's read forward because I see Ben Shapiro highlighted here. There are some obvious warning signs that a student is being red-pilled, though, like when they have a sudden and noticeable rightward shift in their views. When they specifically mention figures like Ben Shapiro and Peterson. Peterson isn't even a right-wing guy. He's just a guy who believes in personal responsibility. Politically speaking, he's kind of a centrist, but I think he even has some kind of left-wing views. And Ben Shapiro, Ben Shapiro is the most vanilla milquetoast conservative you could possibly find out there. He is as milquetoast as they get. And it's funny because, you've seen Ben Shapiro called alt-right before, and the alt-right were specifically anti-Semitic, and Ben Shapiro got the most, I think it was in 2016, got the most hate thrown at him from the alt-right than anybody else, more than anybody on the left, more than any black person, more than any minority, more than any gay person. It was Ben Shapiro that got the hate from the alt-right, and then he had to get called alt-right. Now, I'm not really a fan of Ben Shapiro because he's just a little neocon for me, and he's a little bit stuck in a conservatism that I think is dated. I've kind of gone more towards the Trumpism side of things, which is a little bit more populist in nature, and I don't like neocons. But Ben Shapiro is not far right. He is as milquetoast and bland as you can get when it comes to conservative commentary. So when they specifically mention figures like Ben Shapiro and Peterson, who Olivia says her students loved. Ben Shapiro is entry-level conservatism. That's what he is. He is good for hearing like the Ben Shapiro owns a college student type thing, where people actually get to hear an argument broken down right in front of them. He is good for that. But eventually you outgrow Ben Shapiro when you are a conservative, and I don't mean outgrow him in terms of get more right, but you just get more nuance than the neoconism of Ben Shapiro is like a 2010 conservative. When they use language that makes the online influence obvious, like Chad and cuck, that's just mimetic. That's mimetic right there. That's just seeing memes online, and they're funny. They're funny. So she hates that people have a sense of humor that isn't like this pearl clutching nature that we see in all of our left-wing intersectional doctrination that has no humor whatsoever. There's also been there's always been boys who ask, "Don't girls just lie about rape though?" Wait, there's always been boys who ask that. Well, I guess they haven't been radicalized, but there's always been boys that ask that. Don't girls just lie about rape though? And we do want to take those questions seriously. Ferderber says, that's the funniest name. I'm sorry, Ferderber. Well, I mean, the truth is, like, yes, sometimes women do lie, which is a very good time. It's a very good teaching moment to tell a young man that, yes, honestly, sometimes there are women out there who will lie about sexual assault because they feel like they have something to gain, or maybe they're just not right in the head and they want to take you down for some reason. So that's an important lesson, that you should not just go around hitting on and sleeping with every girl you see, that you should actually date somebody and approach things in a more traditional standpoint. That you shouldn't just that you need to be careful about the type of women that you involve yourself with. I mean, hell, I've involved myself with some crazy ones before, and I've learned from it. I had to learn the damn hard way. But increasingly, they're using language that sounds straight from Reddit? Straight from Reddit? Reddit is one of the most left-wing places on the entire internet. I mean, they banned the Donald months after the Donald had already shut down. These people have no idea what they're talking about. So they're using language that sounds straight from Reddit, and that they're satisfied with an answer or a statistic I can cite, or that they aren't satisfied with an answer or a statistic I can cite. That's probably because they have other statistics and have heard other answers that prove you're wrong. And the fact of the matter is you're just wrong. Those are teenage boys who have MRA talking points. I got a feeling she's also conflating MRA, men's rights activists, with anything to the right of center. They're extremely fixated on the idea of false accusations, and they talk about women getting a lot of money by accusing men of rape, but when pressed, they don't really know how that would happen. That's because they're children, and they're still learning and understanding the arguments. But if you have a man who is wealthy and you want to accuse them of rape, you can extort him for money for his silence. That is a very easy thing to answer, and we see it happen with like actors and athletes and business people all the time. When teachers notice the warning signs of radicalization, difficult questions arise. Where is the line between shutting down these arguments and allowing kids to explore new ideas? And when is the right moment to intervene? First of all, you're a teacher, not a parent. So the right moment to intervene is never. Never. It's not your job. If you want to talk to the parents and then the parents say, this is how we're raising our kid, then you say, okay, it's your kid. But you don't intervene. Jacob, a 28-year-old teacher in Texas, says that this can be a very delicate balance. I would never want to convert someone to being a liberal because you shouldn't be converting people to political ideologies. Wow, look at that. Now, I hate to sound like a men's rights activist, but you get the... Do you think it's a surprise that the most even-keeled response comes from Jacob and not Tessa or Kierlyn Furberter or Annie Kelly, or, you get the trend that I'm talking about here. Because you shouldn't be converting anybody to political ideologies, he says. Nonetheless, he's had success convincing even the alt-right kids that you can spot a mile away to consider alternative points of view. And sure, that happens through open dialogue and open discussion. If somebody is legitimately alt-right, like they have white ethnocentric points of view, then you should be able to have discussions with them, and your discussions will win out because they're the better discussion. They're the better argument. I'll tell my students that it's always better to err on the side of compassion than aggression, that the root of our problems is fear, and that getting to understand how other people live makes your life better, he explains. I tell the kids that I don't care what they think so long as they think for themselves. I got no problem with anything Jacob's been saying. The trouble, Jacob says, is that when he discusses ideas with his students that pose even the mildest challenge to the conservative orthodoxy that prevails in his region, he faces backlash from the parents. Yeah, well, if you're teaching in a conservative area and you're teaching left-wing thoughts, then you are going to come across issues with conservative parents who don't want their children being indoctrinated by these left-wing thoughts. That's because they're actually being vigilant about what their students are being taught. These are people that are not going to sign these contracts that say, "Oh, I won't listen in on any classes that my child's taking." Once he was reported by a parent for teaching students the secular common era notation system. Again, it's just we don't want to see these changes. Like let some traditions be. You know, BC is fine. BC AD, work with it. And another time, he got phone calls for telling his class about religions other than Christianity. I just informed them. That's it. I mean, I don't think there's any issue with teaching certain things about other religions, but you also have to teach Christianity too. You can't teach other religions and then ban Christianity, which is I think a lot of what we see going on in some of these public schools. It's just like exposing them to the knowledge is threatening, and even when I toe the line, I still get in trouble. He said, "It becomes difficult. It becomes a difficult game of both sidesism, in which secular and scientific ideas are treated as some kind of left-wing radicalization on his part." That is because, I mean, you do have some parents that are now becoming hyper-vigilant about the left-wing radicalization and the left-wing indoctrination that is happening in schools, simply because the issue of left-wing indoctrination in schools has gotten very, very bad. If the educational system wasn't so Marxist, hadn't been infiltrated by Marxists, and hadn't become such a center of indoctrination, then these parents likely wouldn't feel the need to be so vigilant about what ideas are being put into their children's heads. So he says, I've had to accept from time to time that I will teach tolerance, and they will see it it will be seen as brainwashing. He tells me. Tessa says that students often take on conspiratorial mindset too. A lot of the conspiracies these students believe, like superior white genetics or being the LGBTQ plus, is a mental illness. First of all, I don't think there's a lot of little kids running around thinking that white genetics are the best. That is not really an issue in America. There might be a few people here and there that they hear this stuff. Maybe, I don't know. And when they say that being LGBTQ plus is a mental illness, I think we are highlighting a particular letter in that, and that is the T. And yes, the T is a mental illness because it was listed as a mental illness in the DCM, all the DCMs, all the medical guidelines listed it as a gender dysphoria, which was a mental disease or a mental condition. All right, take root for them specifically because they think it's a hidden truth that I'm keeping from them as a teacher. She explains, they think that I'm brainwashed by liberal narratives and that I'm compelled to lie to them. Here's the thing. A lot of them are brainwashed by liberal narratives, and they're not even liberal, they're leftist narratives. And you are compelled to lie to them even if you don't realize that that's what you're doing. It's because you're brainwashed by leftist narratives. So when people start seeing all of these other sources of information that starts putting cracks in the narratives, that these left-wing narratives, these people are now, this is basically one big outcry because they're losing grip on the narrative. That's really what this all comes down to. They're losing grip on the narrative and they can't stand it. And the free flow of information has been the biggest tool to wield against the indoctrination of American kids. Now, this goes on, and I don't know if there's a whole lot more. This is starting to get pretty long because I've gone quite a bit off of this, but I think you kind of see the idea that this article is espousing. That they are obviously conflating just standard run-of-the-mill conservatives with alt-right. It's a trick that they do to shift the Overton window. It's not a new tactic. It's a tried and true tactic of the left. But now you just have people that are seeing through it. So, anyways, guys, that's the video. I do think we need to be vigilant about what our kids are learning in school, and we need to hold teachers to account. And the more we do that, the more we break down how comfortable they've become with indoctrinating your kids with leftist Marxist ideology, the more hope we have for an education that actually does teach critical thinking. And I mean, the fact that she said that Joe Rogan is the biggest threat to critical thinking, it's mind-boggling. It absolutely reveals the mindset of these people, because he has people from all spectrums on. So you get to hear all different kinds of arguments on Joe Rogan's podcast, and then you have to use critical thinking to choose which one makes most sense to you. So people like Joe Rogan are actually the exact antithesis of everything that they're saying. But again, that's the left for you. They're always projecting. They never have any sort of sense of self-awareness. It's just what we've come to expect from them. But we're being more vigilant now, and we're holding them to account, and that is a very, very good thing. So anyways, guys, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it, let people know what's going on in our education system. Oh yeah, that was one last thing that I wanted to talk about. If you guys saw my video from being on the ground with at the Children's March here in Hollywood yesterday, then you'll saw that I actually had a chance to speak with Errol Weber, who is a conservative congressman or a conservative congressional candidate running in Los Angeles. And one of the things that he mentioned was that we have a major problem with grooming in our schools. And I think that is very, very accurate with a lot of the sex education that goes on in our schools. And they're teaching our kids these LGBTQ things at very, very young ages. And ages where they shouldn't even be thinking about that kind of stuff. And so I'm endorsing Errol Weber here. You know, unfortunately, I live just north of his district. I can't vote for him, but if you live in that district, I would say please vote for him. I think that's going to be a big issue is grooming in our schools, because we have seen a massive amount of reports over the last few years about these teachers and mostly they're women that sleep with these like 13, 14-year-old students of theirs. And it's mind-boggling because you see the pictures of these teachers and they're typically very attractive. So, but they're sleeping with little teenage boys, and I don't know. Anyways, that's a whole nother thing. But anyways, like this video, subscribe, share it. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Parler at Ram Thorburn. Also, if you're interested in contributing to the channel, there are links to my Subscribestar, Patreon, and PayPal down in the description below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope you'll have a wonderful, wonderful day.